longer will we allow you to have our voice, our power, our freedom. We shall no longer be caged in. We are breaking free. Love is a beautiful thing, isn't it? Walking down the street, seeing a couple holding hands, kissing, and wishing that was you. What if I told you around 36% of those relationships are unhealthy and toxic? Everyone wants the ring, but at what cost? Are you willing to give up your freedom, your power, your voice? Being in these sort of relationships can sometimes feel like you're drowning in the ocean and no one's around to save you. It's as if the ocean is your partner pulling you under until they consume all your power. But sooner or later, you'll free yourself from them and rise to the surface again. Please listen with an open mind as these brave souls tell their story.
My name is Levita Marie Branch.
My name is Sabrina Pruitt.
My name is Paul Muhammad.
Hi, my name is Ashley.
Hi, my name is Sylvia Davis.
My name is Shauna Frisbee.
My name is Lisa Bush.
My name is Tori Woodall.
My domestic violence started when I was 20. I was in the Miss Rockbridge County pageant, and I met this really funny guy after I had won Miss Rockbridge County. I met this really funny guy, and he said all the right things, and we had the same birthday, so we just knew we were meant to be together. And so we dated. We started dating in March, and then we decided to get married. So we got married in September. So it was a very short courtship, and everything was absolutely wonderful. And then I got a new job at the bank, and people started making comments like writing letters saying that about me being a great employee and how they loved coming to the bank. And that was when his jealousy first started showing. And he did not like sharing me with others. When we were together, everything was fine and fun. But when other people noticed me, then there was a little green-eyed monster. And the first time after our marriage, we had gone to visit our family and in Southwest Virginia, and everybody was talking about how good I looked because I had lost weight, and I had on a nice new pretty dress, and everybody was making comments about the dress. And so we visited with our family. We went back to our home, which was 2.5 hours away. And that night we were getting ready to get dressed, to go to bed. Took off my, he asked me, did I think my dress was pretty? And so he took the dress and he ripped it all the way down, and all of the buttons came off. And that was the first time that I really saw that I was probably in a bad situation. And so to speed forward, as time went along, there would be times like, for instance, I love to sing and dance. And one time he came home from work and I was dancing and singing. And he said, "Oh, you like that record? Do you like that song?" And he went over and he took the record off the record player and he crashed it on his knee. So it was just little things like that that led up to the first time that he actually hit me. And the first time that he did it, I was able to make excuses to my family. Told them I had hit my head on the wall and fallen down the stairs, and But then there was the one time that it was just it was terrible. I hit my head on the wall. He hit me, and I hit my head on the wall, and really thought I saw stars. And I tried to escape, but he followed me all night. So it was just several happenings that let me know that he was not always the funny guy. I did not want to disappoint my family because my mom told me not to get married, and I didn't want her to be right. That I so I really thought that he loved me and he would change. The last time that he beat me, um, my eye was completely closed, and I realized that if I did not, if I did not escape, that he would probably take my life. I just, I knew he was a sick person. I knew that he himself had some problems. So I felt sorry for him. This situation has scarred me. I find it very difficult to trust. Even years later, I'm still afraid to trust. And in relationships that I've tried to have, I'm always afraid that the man is going to change and that he will eventually um, be an abuser. Okay. What would I tell my younger self? Okay. What would I tell my younger self? I've never talked about this before. I mean, not really, really, really. So
it's okay. There are a lot of broken women in this exact same position, and they're walking around successful, but they're still broken. So if given the opportunity to go back in time, knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self?
you don't have to compromise to be loved. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. Because if I had loved myself, I would not have stayed in that as long as I did. But I had a desire to be loved. I wanted to be loved, and I wanted to love. And so I was searching for that. Although I'm still healing, although I still hurt sometimes, I still know that I'm a butterfly and I can soar, and so can you. No one deserves to be beat on. Um, love does not hurt. And if you're hurting, then you need to seek help.
Domestic violence for me started at the age of around 38 years old. During that time, I was a teacher then as well. I also rededicated my life to God. So, in the process, of course, I always said to God, I remember going to church one day and the pastor talked about the lady in the Bible who, eventually got a mate. And I said, God, I asked God to send me a husband. And of course, we always think that the first person come along is the one that God has sent for us. So it was like the person that I ended up eventually with and later married was like a wolf in sheep clothing. Because although I rededicated my life to God and I thought that this was the person that He had for me, as time has gone on, I realized that that wasn't so. I remember being at work one day because I had a bruise on me, and he actually threw me into the door. And my principal asked me, said, Sabrina, what happened? Of course, I lied. I lied about the bruise that was on my arm, and I just said, "Oh, I hit myself," and that actually was the beginning of how things began to happen. He was very controlling. Even prior to him actually moving in with me, he would ask me questions like, "Why are you out a certain time?" So I would have to lie when I was out with my friends. And sometimes I even thought it was cute because, somebody caring so much about you and caring about your well being and where you are, you think that that's automatically something that's great and something that you want. However, as time went on and went on, I realized that he was trying to control who I spoke to, my friends, who was in my life at the time. If I even looked at someone, a guy passed walking across the street and I was with him, he would immediately snap. And I remember one time a friend that I had, he was my friend all the way from high school, and we still kept in contact. And I remember one time him calling me and I lied. And I said it was a girl. So, of course, he called him back. And when he found out it was a guy, he blew up. But even then, that still didn't stop me. I thought that, he just was a little jealous, but it was cute. And I thought all of that was, what I had to endure in a relationship at that time. However, time just went on and on and on. And of course, to be honest, I did my best to black out a lot of those memories. So I didn't want to think about it anymore. I would go to sleep and have nightmares, still reminiscing about the things that he has done. Um, it's just so much. So I'm really trying to think about it. I stopped being myself. Of course, the way that I dressed, I couldn't dress that way anymore because he wanted me like in clothes that was baggy, not fitting my figure. Mind you, when he met me, I was who I was. And no matter what, of course, I never thought that someone like me would endure, more or less put up with someone being abusive to me. Prior to us getting married, I remember one day being in the back room because we had a room in the house which was just empty. No one occupied that room. So originally he was supposed to move with his family, but it didn't work out that way. So I allowed him to live with me prior to us getting married. And he was in that room. And I remember one day him choking me. And when he choked me, I blanked out. I could have died that day. And I was so, so scared. Just, wondering, like, wow, this is serious. But that still didn't stop me. I continued in a relationship with him. Later on, we got engaged and I found out I was pregnant. So, of course, I was devastated by that because I didn't want any more children out of wedlock. I cried. However, I went on and I had my daughter, who's now 9 years old, soon will be 10. And I remember, you know, it got worse as time progressively moved forward. I wanted to back out of my wedding. I remember something happened. I don't quite remember what it was, but I remember at that moment that I wasn't too sure if this was something that I wanted to do. But like most women, young women, even some that are old, that are still looking for love and just want to be married. That was my goal. I just wanted to be married. I wanted to be married. I had this fantasy wetting in mind how it's supposed to be. You just supposed to live happily ever after and just be with someone that just love you and where that person's supposed to protect you. That's not what happened. So it really got worse, I would say, my wedding day. My wedding day was one day that just really, 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 up until, me meeting my husband, who I'm now married to, we've been married now 2 years, up until me being married to him, it was like a moment that I just couldn't shake, couldn't get out of my mind. I remember spending a lot of my money for the wedding. I spent so much money. And excuse me, I spent so much money for my wedding. It was like I had the most beautiful reception hall. Family members, people came, my coworkers came, everyone came just to spend that day with me. But I remember getting out of the limousine on my way, getting ready to go into the church. I looked into the glass of the car that I was riding in. And in the process of looking in that mirror, the reflection from the car window, I saw my deceased sister in me. It was like I saw her instead of seeing me. And that scared me, but I still went on. And walking down the aisle, my husband then at the time, I remember him saluting me as if, you know, the pastor said, you may salute your bride. So that right there kind of stunned me. Backtracking a little bit, my daughter at this time was 6 weeks old. Um, I remember at the receiving line after you get married and you walk down the receiving line, my college friends were there. And I remember one of my college guy friend saying to me, congratulations, baby. And at that moment, my then husband, he just blew up. He just exploded. He started whispering stuff in my ear as if, I'm going to get you. How dare you? And I was petrified at that moment, but not knowing that things were only going to magnify and get worse rather than get better. So at that moment, of course, we had to sign our certificates really quickly and get ready to head over to the reception hall. It was during this moment that my whole world just crumbled apart. You know how the bridal car and the groomsmen all follow the bride and the groom? For whatever reason, at that moment, my entire bridal party, they got lost. So they did not follow us to the park where we were going to take pictures. It was at this time. If you ever saw the movie What's Love Got to Do with It, with Ike and Tina Turner, it was the same thing. My then husband began to pour champagne all over my wedding dress in the back of the limousine. And the limousine driver just kept driving. And I'm just saying to myself, no one's here to help me, to protect me. So, of course, at that moment, I was very distraught. I was upset. I began to cry. And, once we arrived to the park, I remember the photographer saying, well, you don't want to mess up, your day. Just go ahead. I experience this all the time. And, just go ahead like nothing happened and just take pictures. Of course, my bridal party was nowhere to be found. They never made it to the park. It was just myself and my then husband taking pictures, me trying to make the best of it, hoping that, this nightmare that has started will be over. It didn't start. Led to the reception hall. We got to the reception hall. Of course, I went in one room, where the bride would go with the groom. He never made it there. He was drinking at that time. And of course, I didn't know it. I didn't know he was an alcoholic. I know that he got into something with my brother, was about to fight him. Then he was, instead of waiting for us to be introduced, he went inside the reception hall. Of course, all of this was kept from me until later. And he went to confront my college friend. So at that moment, my college friend and him, I just knew it was a lot of commotion in the hallway and people were trying to keep me from it. But things didn't get better. It didn't get better. I remember, I stayed married to him. I never got a chance to throw my bouquet. We only had a first dance only because of his cousin, who was my best friend from high school. And she said, go ahead, just have the best, your first dance. I remember my baby crying back and forth. Of course, it was my wedding day. He was shoving her on me. She was only 6 weeks old. And of course, family members had her. He told her, no, you get her. He took off his shirt. He was just a mess. Had alcohol, liquor, all just laid out everywhere because we had an open bar. legally on paper, we were married for about 5 years, but the marriage was over the day it started. I guess I was just trying to be strong. I tried to put on a good front. I wanted people to think that, everything was good even when it wasn't. And most importantly, I was embarrassed. Well, he cheated, of course, constantly cheating, but it wasn't because of the cheating. It was more because of his alcohol use, domestic violence. He actually, when we moved to Georgia, I remember us being around the corner subdivision. I went around to his job for something I don't quite remember, but I remember at that moment he thought I was talking to one of the other barbers because he was a barber. He came outside and threw me on the ground. And in the process of throwing me on the ground, I remember my finger bleeding. So I called the cops on him. And at that moment, I filed paperwork. And of course, I have, to this day, we have a nonviolent contact order. So it was at that moment that things began to spiral out of place. Did I file for a divorce? No. Because me being a Christian woman, I felt that, although you get married, you go through things, you're supposed to stay in it, until death do you part. Him cheating and so forth, doing all of those things. He was no longer living with me. He moved his mistress up in our subdivision, but I didn't know. He had a son whose mom died when he was very young. So I was the only mom that he knew. So I still had custody of his son while he was out in the street, living up with his mistress. I remember one day being at work many years, probably about a year later. I was served papers at my job from him. Of course, I was ecstatic. I was ready to be done with this. So that's how the marriage pretty much ended. Him sending me papers. Of course, in the process, it didn't stop with him with his abuse. He threatened me. He said that I was harassing him, that I came to his job. That I haven't even seen him. So, of course, I had to spend almost $10,000 getting a lawyer to not only file for a divorce, but to keep my job so that I wouldn't have those type of problems. He never showed up to court. So, of course, the restraint order that he allegedly took out on me was all thrown out. And I end up keeping mine. And of course, over time, restraint orders do expire. The only thing that didn't expire was the nonviolent contact. So to this day, he's wherever. He'll call sometimes once in a blue for my youngest child. I never kept him from her, regardless to what. But in terms of me, like I said, I still have nightmares. Sometimes I still think about him. It's so much that I could talk about. Of course, I try to pinpoint certain things going back. I remember getting up one day, getting ready for church, and him just hitting a hole in the wall. Not only that, him coming back to our apartment. Well, it was the house that we were renting at the time. We first moved down here. It was like, what in the world? The cops wouldn't let me go in, only let him go in to allegedly so-called get his stuff. But he wasn't getting his stuff. He was destroying the property. When I walked in, all I know in our master bedroom, I heard water. And I was like, water? So I went in there. He was already gone. I opened up the door. He had both basins in the sink filled up with water. The tub was filled up and all my clothes was thrown inside. Then downstairs in our living room, he had my flat screen TV. I don't know what it was that he took, but he actually scraped something up on it to where the TV, to this day, I still have it. And I was just telling my husband now that I think it's time to get rid of it because I just don't want those memories anymore. But I had, he scraped up the TV. Of course, I called the cops. And of course, I filed the report. We went to court. And the only thing, I told him I don't want anything from him. All I want is for him to just repair the damage that he did to the property and replace my TV. But of course, he gave some money, but it wasn't all what could have been replaced at that time. What I would tell my younger self is you just got to be careful. You got to be careful of everyone that present themselves to you, and everything is not from God. But the most important thing that I do, and I always, and people may say I'm crazy, because of the blessings that God had bestowed upon me and the man that He sent in my life. I always tell people if I have to go back through what I've been through to get the man that God has for me, as crazy as it may seem, I would do it all over again.
I got married at a very young age. My first marriage, I was 23 years old when I first got married. And there were some things, some signs that I saw prior to being married that I really denied. But I didn't know they would become an issue. And my ex-wife, she told me that she loved to fight boys when she was growing up and had no problem with fighting a man. But I didn't think that would translate over into the relationship. And so as time went on, when issues arose, she really took a hard, aggressive stance against me to the point where it got kind of violent. I recall one time I would tell her not to lay the baby on the bed because when babies are young, they tend to fall off the bed. That's why they have what's called a bassinet. And she would do it anyway. And so he would fall off the bed. And then one particular time he fell on the opposite side of the bed and was stuck. So I went and grabbed my son and he stopped crying. And she come over and she said, well, give him to me. And I said, no, I got it. I told you to stop putting him on that's on the bed like that. And she said, give him to me. And she started pulling on me and tugging on me. And I kind of pushed her off me and she fell on the bed. And when she fell on the bed, she started kicking me. I mean, kicking me very hard. And I continued to tell her, look, stop kicking me. Stop kicking. She just continued and continued. And so that's how it kind of started. And so the relationship was just full of that. I recall another instance where she would always make doctor's appointments during the time where I would have the children or whatnot. So one particular time, and I would do it, but one particular time I'm like, I got to go to work. If it's not an emergency, I need to go to work. And so she came over to the house. She went into the back room. We were kind of separated at the time. She went into the back room. When she came out of the back room, I was holding my son. And she said, what kind of father are you? And struck me physically in the mouth. She balled her fist up and struck me in the mouth. And so what she did from that point, then she grabbed an iron and she just kept kind of coming. I had to kind of restrain her to keep her away from me. And then what she did next was she went to and tried to get a bogus restraining order on me. So, sometimes when people that do the domestic violence to the victim, they will act as if the victim is doing something to them. And so when you read the report, and I still have it, when you read the report, it said I beat her severely when it was actually me who she struck in the mouth. She didn't like beat me down or nothing like that because I don't put my hands on a woman. Only thing I'm going to do is stop you from putting your hands on me. But she did ball her fist up and strike me in the mouth. She threw the iron at me, did all kind of stuff. And while some people might think that's light, it's really not. It's still domestic violence. There were red flags. As I spoke of earlier, there was an aggressiveness that she had about herself, even towards another man. I recall a time where she said this particular individual disrespected her. And so I said that I'm going to go address the issue with this man. And if I find out that he disrespected you, I'm going to deal with it accordingly. Um, However, I know that my wife at that time had a mouth on her. She liked to mouth off a little bit. And so while I was talking to the guy trying to get to the bottom of it, she's screaming out, he's not going to be lying on me. He's not going to be lying on me. So I asked her to go upstairs and wait while I deal with the issue. She's still screaming down the steps. Next thing I know, she come running down the steps, reached around me and slapped the guy. And so I saw that early on, but I denied the sign once again. I didn't know how much of that would translate into our relationship. The excuse I made was that that was just how she is, and that was just an isolated incident, and that spiritually we could work through it. I gave my all to her. That was my first family, and I never wanted to see that family be destroyed. And I felt like the things that she had begun to do was destroying and eroding our family. They don't take the victim serious, especially when the victim is considered a man, um, because from what I understand, domestic violence, when you hear about it, you typically think about something that a man is doing to a woman and not something that a woman is doing to a man. But we can be victims too. Um, so yeah, people don't they don't when I talk about it, they're like, oh no, they think, oh, you must have done something. They take that position, or you must have done something to her to cause her to do that to you. But no, that's not the. Don't deny the signs and ask the right questions when you in your courtship. When you courting a woman, ask the right question. Ask is there a history of abuse. Ask if she's ever abused someone, and ask her if someone has ever abused her. And if that is the case, that doesn't mean it's a deal breaker. That just means now you got to hold that individual accountable for their personal healing. Sometimes we in love with the idea of being married, and so we go and don't really study ourselves to really know what we need. So I would say to my younger self, take your time. Don't say I do too fast. Learn what you really need in a woman and find what you need. I would say yes. Do not hit a woman no matter what. Control yourself enough that the only thing you should be doing is defending yourself and preventing someone from hitting you, but never be in a position where you allow a woman's words to drive you or actions to drive you to put your hands on her. My ex-wife actually attacked me in front of people at the temple, at the Islamic temple that we attended, and it doesn't make it right. You know, a lot of people assume that when a woman attacks a man, that is something that the man had to do in order to make this happen. She was keeping my children away from me, my two sons, and I just wanted to see my sons. And at this time, she had been hiding her hand. She had been able to tell people it was me, it was me, it was me. But this particular time, she was exposed to everybody. So I went there to see my son, and I waited patiently to go into a room to talk to those who were in charge at that time. And as I was coming into the room, my oldest son, he held his hands up to me because he hadn't seen his father in maybe 2 or 3 months. And so she said, "Don't touch him. Don't touch him." So now that's abusive within itself. You telling me not to touch my own child when you know I haven't seen him, but you're playing the game. So when you walk past me, you smirking because you feel like you got one up. And so when I went to grab my son anyway, that's when she began to swing at me. "I'm going to kill you." She was saying stuff like, "I'm going to kill you." And she was pregnant, I did not know, with my second son at that time. So it just doesn't make it right. And people were enabling her because they had nothing to say about it, because it was all sympathetic towards her. And she even, despite what they saw with their eyes, the women that were there banded with her because she had convinced them that I came, despite me sitting there waiting an hour to talk to them and those in charge. She had the women feeling like I came to kidnap my son. And so they all were enabling her. So when you enable abusers like that, it erodes the fabric of relationship, marriage, as well as the temple. Those who didn't know nothing about what we were dealing with, now they all are affected. So you see other women, they're crying, other men, they're crying because they seeing that something is wrong. Why are y'all doing this? Why is this scenario playing itself out? But it just enabled. And if you ask her to this day, she will lie and say that I mentally abused her as a justification of the things that she did to me. A lot of times, there's a lot of black men that lose their lives that are victims of domestic violence because the abuser go back to their families and they tell their families these elaborate stories that are untrue. It had the same thing that happened to me almost, but I'm still alive, thank be to God. But she went back and painted this picture, this gruesome picture of me to her family to justify the things that she was doing. And I remember one time her cousin and uncle, I think one of her relatives had just got out of jail. So they asked me to come over to the house and come down in the basement. I went, because I don't feel like I'm scared of nothing. So I went, like, it is what it is. Because for one, I know I haven't done anything to her. And two, I'm hoping that these guys have a sound mind to not feed into the drama that she was playing out. And so they would question me, well, what about this? What about this? And I'm explaining to them that I've never done anything to harm her. I've treated her like a queen. But there's so many men that didn't make it that far, that those guys in that situation would have had intent to kill this person who they believe just have abused their cousin, auntie, or whoever. So society has painted this picture that a man can't be abused, and that's far from the truth. And I go back to what I was saying about the other scenario when I was attacked in the temple. She had convinced these women to such degree that I was coming to kidnap my son that they called the police on me. And now the police is coming to get involved, and the police got their weapons. The police is telling me to put my son down, and she running around, and she also, there was a blind man that was with me, an elder. He was blind. She hit him in the back of his head. So she was just abusive all the way around. So in order to not look crazy herself, she had to continue to try to paint these pictures of myself. So what they do is they pass the blame. Passing the blame is so easy. It's easier when you got enablers. And so there's a lot of enablers to women who abuse men today. I'm not trying to justify men beating on women. I'm just trying to expose that domestic violence does happen to men.
A lot of men are too ashamed to speak up because people who have never been in their position tend to invalidate their emotions by telling them they had to do something to make her do it.
My name is Tori Woodell, and I'm going to be reading 2 submissions. This story was submitted by Dana Brown. Dana was 13, being groomed by a guy in high school who she thought she was in love with, and at the time she was only in middle school. They dated on and off for about 4 years. She didn't officially break it off until sophomore year. She says that he was very manipulative, emotional, and physically abusive at times, but would sum it up as love. He made her feel like when he slapped her, cheated on her, and disrespected her, it would all be because she deserved it. When in all reality, she wasn't doing anything but growing up and realizing how toxic he truly was. Then he would always come back the next day being nicer than usual, or saying things like, "No one will ever love you like me," or "No one will want to have damaged goods for a long time." At the time, she believed him and thought she was incapable of being loved, which caused a long line of messed up relationships. She was never truly happy unless she was with him. She now knows that this was never real love, but more of a pet and owner relationship. He was more emotionally abusive than physical, but she has stated that there have been a couple altercations where he was drunk and choked her up because he thought she was texting other guys. He has slapped her because she embarrassed him in front of his friends, and he ended up breaking up with her because she found out he was cheating, and he ended up blocking her just before telling her she was better off dead and that she should cut deeper next time. He struck her deep with that one because he knew she was depressed and would inflict self-harm. They got back together, but they would still go back and forth arguing all the time. She says the last straw was when he choked her at a pool party. She ended up leaving him and finally moved on, talking to a therapist, and blocked him on everything. She said one thing she'd tell her younger self is not to mess with older guys. Also to realize that she'd have to fix her own hole that her father left, and to always remember to love herself more than anyone.
I remember us getting into a little argument. We were at my mother's house, and something simple as this. He was sitting on my mother's couch, and I was standing looking out the window in my own right, just looking out the window at the weather. And he said he wanted me to come sit down next to him, and I would not go. I was like, why can't I stand here and look out the window? And he was saying, come and sit down, with such a voice, angry voice over me just not coming to sit down next to him and looking out the window. So because I did not go over there and sit next to him, the next words that came out of his mouth were so chilling and so scary. And I remember just freezing inside because he told me if I did not go to sit down that he was going to kill me. Hairs on my arms stood up because the way that he said it, it was so hostile, yet subtle, but he said it with such a force, like, I will kill you, all over me not coming to sit on the couch. But of course we know that it wasn't about that. At this time I was not recognizing that it was abuse because I was, um let's say, lonely at the time. And so I was very misled by what he presented, because I started off telling him I was a woman of God. I had no chance and no time, no opportunity to actually show him I was a woman of God. I just voiced that I was a woman of God. And because I voiced that, then he appeared as a man of God when he really wasn't. I stand on my own. I know how to defend myself. But this particular relationship, I do not know why, because I was so caught up in, oh, I have somebody. And that right there is when anybody can almost walk in to your world, because I felt like, oh, I have love. When we started out, we were on the phone all day, but I noticed that everything I would say that, oh, I wanted or I needed, he instantly became that with no work done behind it. I just went off of what he said. The funny thing is, he called me queen and saying, like, you carry yourself as such, but he did not treat me like that. I ended up being in a 5-year relationship, and not even physically. It was 5-year relationship, mental and emotionally, because I didn't even want to sleep with him. I didn't really want to be with him, but I could not disconnect for the words of abuse constantly. I did not know that they was tearing down my spirit. So even after 2 years, I was trying to get out of the relationship. I could not get out. I felt so weak. I felt so beat down. He cuss like nobody's business. Like that was his only language. If I tried to defend myself, here's where it became narcissistic behavior. If I tried to defend myself, he would then go and be like, "Oh, you don't love me." And me being weak, I would fold to that. I would fold to that because I didn't have enough strength mentally. I had already came through so much. So this looked like right to me. I also lowered my standards. Oh my God. I lowered my standards on um, what type of person that I should be walking in relationship with. I just was like, and I actually would say this. I would be like, I'm just going to settle for him, even though I was crying on the regular. Actually, being in that relationship, I became the opposite of him. I would have yelling, cussing matches with him, and then we would go through these whole fighting evenings, and then he would say, "Oh, I never meant to hurt you. I'm the only man for you, and I love you." And I don't know why, but it sounded believable. Um, One, I have a praying mother. Okay, my mom met him. That was one sign. She came and she said, he's a nice gentleman, but God hasn't done, he won't let God work for him. And she said that she's seen a murderous spirit on him. And I told my mom, Mom, here you go. Thus, through the relationship, he would constantly say to me, like, I'll kill you, out of nowhere. And it always sent chills. Not only that, he shared that his family were, they didn't have a problem with taking somebody out of this world and those kind of things. So those were signs that God showed me. Just a lot of upfront. In our conversations up front, he automatically told me who he was. But I was so gone that I was like, oh, that don't have nothing to do with me. Like, oh, he wouldn't treat me this way. Or, he shared stories about the men in his family beating on women and all of that. So those signs were there. I did not take heed to them for the fact of feeling like I was lonely and I had nobody at that time, which makes you gullible and naive, and then you settle for what is presented, what looks like love, and is nowhere near love. Towards the end, when I realized I had a deep soul tie, now here was a man that I spent all this time with. The most things that I'm doing was the arguing and the fighting. And it's so funny. 5 years, he never took me out. 5 years, never did anything for me. It was just arguing and fighting. Towards the end, when I got therapy, I then realized that I was in an abusive relationship with a narcissistic man. So it wasn't until I started talking to people that had came out of those situations and they were saying to me, he's no good. And I didn't listen.
I'm a survivor of domestic violence. Growing up, that was not even a real word, and in most Black families, it's not even a real thing. I watched my mom and dad fight all the time. As a kid, me and my sisters and brothers, we used to say, "Ooh, Dad won this one," or we'll say, "Ooh, Mom won that one," and it became normal. Even though there was a part of me that always knew that it wasn't right, it was acceptable. It was accepted in the community that I'm from. I was 20 when I got into a domestic violence relationship. And what's funny is I watched girlfriends of mine get black eyes, get beat up, and I would always say, that would never happen to me. And I'll never forget the first time my boyfriend at that time slapped me. It shocked me, but it also, of course it hurted, but it more so shocked me because I always thought that this would never happen to me. And I think that's the first thought that crosses a lot of women's mind, is that, that could never happen to me. So even if we see the red flags, we don't pay any attention to it, because in the back of our minds, we feel like that can never be me. But maybe 20 seconds after he slapped me, it was like I just blacked out. I just remembered my mom and my dad fighting, and I just attacked them. And there was other people in the house, and they kept trying to pull me off of him. And I just could not, I was in such rage that I could not stop fighting him. Of course I didn't win. I'm a female. But after it happened, I remember thinking to myself, why did I get so enraged, so angry after he had slapped me? And all I thought about is, only thing that could come to my mind is when my mom and dad would fight. As a child, I hated to see my mom and dad fight. I hated to see my dad, what he would do to my mom, even though my mom always fought back. And I think that's where I learned it from. If a man hits you, you fight back. So you're in your mind, you're really not losing, and it's really not domestic violence because you're fighting back. But after the first time I got slapped, I remember thinking back to the aftermath of it. After my mom and dad fought, even though she fought back, she walked away with the bruised ribs, the black eyes, couldn't get out of bed for a couple of days. So her fighting back didn't stop, the aftermath of it all. So I told myself after the first time I got slapped, I was never going to get slapped again. No man is ever going to hit me again. Instead of telling myself I should just leave, because I found out later on that his ex-girlfriends prior to me, he had put his hands on them too. So you would think my awakening would have been, just leave. He's not worth it. But it wasn't. I learned the behavior from my mother. If he hits you, you fight back, and there's going to be consequences for him if he hits you again. And needless to say, he did. And when he hit me the next time, we had all been drinking, and we were outside of my home at the time, and he slapped me, but I knew he was really, really drunk. So I was going to run in the house and try to get a knife. I remember this. And when I ran in the house to get the knife, I slammed the door shut and I locked it. He was so drunk that he kicked the door. And my cousin, who was in the house with me at the time, she said, he's about to kick the hinges off the door. So I told her to, because she had put the couch in front of the door, I said, move the couch and unlock the door. And when she did that, the next time it kicked it, the door just flew open. And he was like, where's she at? Calling me out my name and everything. And I said, I'm in here, which I was in the kitchen. And I had 2 knives in my hand. I didn't have them behind my back, but he was in such a rage, he didn't pay attention to the knives. And he walked in the kitchen, he called me out my name, he walked up on me, pointing his finger in my face, and when he went to punch me with a closed fist, I just started stabbing away. And that was, I think, the beginning for me of a really dark season of my life. And now looking back on the whole relationship, even before the first time he ever slapped me, he even though he only physically slapped me twice, the first time he slapped me, we fought, and the second time is, of course, when I went crazy. But looking back, even before the slap, there was abuse there. I never called him out his name, even though I was in the streets and stuff. I never was one of them females, oh, you punk, this, all that type of stuff. But there was signs then. He was very, very possessive. He didn't like the fact that, a lot of people knew me, that I was always really funny and really silly, and everybody, I was like the life of the party. And I don't believe that he was ever comfortable with, I was like Cheers. Everybody knew my name. Everywhere I went, it was like I was the life of the party. And I don't think that he liked that. And so he would always, accuse me of messing with somebody else, call me out my name. He knew that I hated to be called the B word, BITCH. I hated to be called that, because when I was growing up, that was the abuse that I had to suffer as a child, being called out of my name. So I couldn't stand when a man called me out my name. But he would always, call me out my name, you know, have his friends, because we had the same friends at the time, have them tell him where I was, and he'll just try to like come where I was, just pop up, you know, like he was just in the neighborhood or something. Just, he was really, really controlling. So, looking back now, one of the things I tell young people now is those are just telltale signs of what's to come. If he's possessive now and he's verbally abusive now, physical abuse is coming. And that's one of the things I really, really wish that the world would truly wake their eyes up to, truly open up their eyes to, is just because a woman or a man does not have a black eye or broken arm, they can have a broken heart. Their self-esteem can have been beat down so bad that they will accept anything. Domestic violence is not okay. No matter how young you are, no matter how old you are, domestic violence is not okay. And I encourage you to take heed to the red flags. Maya Angelou said it best: when someone shows you who they are, believe them.
Breaking free, that's all I can say, breaking free. I was married at the age of 17. The first 4 years of my marriage was like heaven. The last 5 years of my marriage was purely hell. And the reason why I say that is because I got married at an early age, not because I had to, it's because I was in love. And at that particular time, we had no children. We were just in love. And 4 years into my marriage, we decided to have our first child, beautiful baby boy. And at that time, my husband found out that he was jealous of the pregnancy. So that's when the verbal abuse started coming in, and the belittling, and then it got from verbal to abusive. So I stayed in the marriage for 9 years, and just trying to make it work, and wouldn't share it with my family because I was too ashamed. My mom didn't want me to get married at that early. She wanted me to finish college. You know, it was just something that I wanted to do, and I don't even know where it even started. It was really bad. The fighting, the cheating, the at one point, I got to the point that I started to hate him, and I know that wasn't good. So I had to break loose, had to let God and let go. So after my 9 years of torment, I had two kids picked up. We had to flee South Carolina and move to Atlanta, and then I was able to get my divorce. I'm just saying this to say to anyone out there that's going through this to please, reach out. There's a lot of women out here who are ashamed to, what they're going through, like I was, to tell the story. But I pray that, you open up, and because one hit can be deadly. One hit, you may not even be able to get back up. So if you ever need to reach out to me, um, I'll give you my information, and I don't know what else to say. It's very emotional. It's very emotional. The the abusive part, the hitting. I'm sorry. I love you. He'll bring you flowers, candy. You think it's going to get better. You think he's going to change, or you can change him, and that would never happen. I was hiding everything until it got too bad. Once it got so bad that he hit me, I had a black eye. I couldn't hide it. So that's how my mom found out that I was being abused. I was just ashamed. After the divorce, every night I had bad dreams. I couldn't go to sleep. I had to go through therapy. Um, but then, I found God in my life, and I prayed for him as well as praying for myself. So I had to once again let God and let go.
What advice would you give your younger self?
My younger self is to wait, um, not to let anybody abuse you, whether it's verbal or physical, and to stay focused. I went through the process of being healed, but now I am healed. But the scar will always be there. But as far as healing, meaning that God has worked on me, He has restored my faith.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I was 16 years old in a domestic violence relationship. And he was about 2, 3 years older than me. And we got involved in a relationship with no one knowing. No, I didn't tell anyone except for my cousin who was with me when we first met. Um, the first time he hit me, we were at my house in my room, and we were just talking, and apparently I said something that he didn't like, so he slapped me. And that was the first time. And I didn't respond because I was pretty much in a state of shock. Like, did this really just happen? Did he just okay. So I let it slide because, like I say, I was in a state of shock. So I didn't act on it at that time. And a couple of weeks went by, and there was another situation where he slapped me again. And at this point, I was like, oh, wait, hold on. I think this is becoming routine. This is becoming a habit, and this is something that he does. So I didn't do anything that time. And the third time he hit me, we were at my house again. We were sitting down watching TV, and I said something, and he didn't hear what I said. And he asked me what I said, and I was like, oh, nothing. It was nothing. And he was like, no, what did you say? And I was like, nothing. I was sitting here, and he was sitting here, and he came across, and he hit me again. So at this time, I was like, oh, no, we is not finna do this. The first time, I was in a state of shock. The second time, I guess I just still couldn't believe that it was going on. But by the third time, I knew that this was a habit. This is what he does. And I'm not going to put up with this and tolerate this. So after that third time, I hit him back. And when I hit him back, I think he was in a state of shock. Matter of fact, he was, because he stepped back and looked like, did you just hit me? The same look I had the first time, that was the look he had after I hit him the first time. And he was like, "Oh, you brave. I never had a female hit me back." And I was like, "I never had a dude hit me at all." I said, "You are the first, and I can guarantee you, you will be the last." And so after that, we got into a physical altercation because he came to like, "Oh, I really did hit him." So he hit me back, and we started fighting. At that point, he got the best of me. We ended up on the ground, and he ended up choking me out to the point to where I passed out. And I remember when I came to, he was in the bathroom washing his face or whatever. So I waited till he came out the bathroom and I punched him back and I hit him and we started fighting again. And we pretty much tore that room up. And I told him, I was like, at this point, I was like, you need to leave. And I don't want to ever see you again. And he left, and I didn't see him until years later. And after seeing him all those years later, he did apologize to me for hitting me. And he did, want to make it right. But at that point, an apology, that was good enough for me. There were signs that I should have took heed to that I decided to ignore. Like there was a particular time where, because he was older than me, he worked overnights. There was a particular time where he would call at like 1 something in the morning. I was still in high school. I was a senior in high school. And he would call at like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm asleep. Like, I got to get up and go to school in a few hours. And he would say things like, well, how you know where I'm at? And I'm like, you working? He was like, no, I could be standing outside of your window watching you sleep right now. Like, I could be just staring at you, watching you. So of course, I looked out the window slowly, like, let me see, is he really crazy enough to do that? And I never seen him looking outside of my window, but I didn't take it for granted because you just never know what people would do. So at that point, a little bit of fear came in, and I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow because I was like, if he is crazy enough to try to come in and do something to me while I'm asleep, I need to be able to defend myself. So I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow for some months. Even after we went our separate ways, I still slept with a knife under my pillow just in case he decided to come in. I did witness abuse, physical abuse, at the age of 4. With me witnessing the abuse that I witnessed at 4 was my dad hitting my mom, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember it. I remember seeing my dad push my mama on the bed because he was cheating and she confronted him, and he got mad and he got in front of her and he pushed her on the bed and they started fighting. And I remember my mama called the police, and I remember the police coming to the house, and the police looked at both of them. My mama was on her way to work. It was like 5 something in the morning because she had to be to work at 6. And I'm 4 years old, and I remember this just like it happened yesterday. It was 5 something in the morning, and I was woken up by all of the fussing. And I watched all of this, and the police officer came, and he said, I could arrest both of you, but I won't because of that little girl right there. And so at that point, I knew it was wrong. I was young, but I knew that wasn't right. But nobody never came to me. Both of my parents, even though they knew that I had witnessed them fighting, nobody never came to me to sit down to say, what you seen is not right. You don't have to put up with that. My daddy didn't come to me and apologize for what I saw. He never came to me and said, do not allow this to happen to you. A man is not supposed to hit a woman. And my mama didn't come to me either and say to me that you don't let no man hit you. She neither one of them never apologized. They never said that it wasn't okay. But nevertheless, with me being in that situation, I still knew it wasn't right, and I knew it was something I wasn't going to put up with. But I just ignored the red flags because I honestly thought that it would not happen to me. It should not happen to me. So I was embarrassed. I did tell my brothers, and it was like years later that I opened up and said something. But at that time, the time had already passed, but it did make me feel better knowing that even after all that time passed, there were still people who cared and people who was in my corner who would have went to war and went to bat for me, because they did. Even after all that time had passed, they went looking for that guy, even after I begged them not to because it was old. But I would tell any young person, anybody, period, male, female, if you're in a domestic violence relationship, there are ways to get out of it. Please seek help, because it's never ever okay for anybody to put their hands on anybody. It doesn't matter if you are a female, it doesn't matter if you are a male. It is not okay. It's never okay. For somebody to hit you the first time, that's one time too many. It's never okay for you to be in any type of relationship that is abusive, whether it's physical, mental, emotional. It's just not okay. And I would advise anybody to just please seek some type of help. I would like to think that I'm not scarred from that particular situation, but apparently I'm still scarred about the situation with my parents. But my own personal experience in that, I wouldn't think that I am scarred as an adult. That happened when I was 16, and I'm now 35, and I use that situation as encouragement to other people. So that situation I'm past in my life. The first time should have been the last time, and it should have been stopped then, and you should have told somebody. Um, you should not have been ashamed. You shouldn't have not been embarrassed, and you shouldn't have let it go on as far as it did.